we know pretty much at this stage where we all have been sitting for a month and a half. Except for Mr. Murphy, who doesn't have a place here.
So, my name is Kathleen Murphy, and I live in River Edge, and I want to welcome everyone here tonight that you've come. This is our Indivisible New Jersey 5th District members. We are over 700 members, and everyone's concerned about the gubernatorial election, so that's why we're here tonight. And we'll introduce our candidates. We have Bill Brennan, who is a former Teaneck firefighter. He's a lawyer, a citizen activist, and Democratic candidate for governor. Known for his direct and forthright style, Bill is a breath of fresh air in a climate that is too often skirts the issues and points fingers. We have Jim Johnson. Jim Johnson grew up in Montclair, New Jersey. After law school, Jim served as a federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York, successfully prosecuting violent drug dealers as well as white-collar criminals. During the Clinton administration, Jim served in several senior positions within the U.S. Department of Treasury. Jim has also been involved with the Brennan Center for Justice as well as the State of New Jersey Advisory Committee on Police Standards. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We also have Mark Zinna. Mark is currently the council president in Tenafly, New Jersey. He owns an Englewood data management business. His focus during his council tenure has been building affordable housing and assisted living facilities, addressing inequitable regulation and encouraging smart development to ease the cost of property taxes. We are waiting for John Wisniewski to come, but we're going to get started before he shows up. So thank you again, everybody. And our moderators are Madeline Trimble and Jody Rigger.
Thanks, Kathleen, and thank you very much to the candidates for coming tonight and participating in this forum. I'm just going to go over the ground rules and the format very briefly. The candidates have been advised in advance what these are. Each candidate will have 2 to 3 minutes for a short introduction. We'll then have a moderated question and answer until approximately 8:20. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to each question, and there's our little timer person over there. Not little, sorry.
It's not small at all.
After the moderated question and answer, we will open up questions for the audience. We do ask that each candidate adhere to the time in consideration of other candidates, and so hopefully we can get to all our questions. I don't think we will, but we can try. And lastly, we're holding this event to discuss issues and not personalities. So it's our goal to keep this clean and respectful, and I'm sure that's not going to be a problem. So we'll start with introductory statements, and Mr. Brennan, we'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Bill Brennan. I'm candidate for governor this year. And I want to thank you all for coming out and participating in this process. It's not often that I get the chance. A lot of you may be familiar with me from Bergen County, whether you go back to the days of my battles with Lonigan, which are ongoing, whether you talk about John Molinelli in the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office and the corruption there, or my complaint against Chris Christie with respect to his crimes at the George Washington Bridge. You know that I've been speaking truth to power at sometimes great expense to myself for quite a long time. And that's what I intend to do here. And I appreciate the opportunity to get in the room and speak to you, because it's not often that I'm invited, because I didn't raise $430,000 and I don't have that kind of money to buy my way into a debate. But I'm here tonight and I'm offering my services to you as somebody who believes strongly that we can do better as a government in the state of New Jersey, and that what we have is completely unacceptable. And when I say unacceptable, the system is broken. And I've been speaking truth to power for quite a long time. I intend to keep doing that. And if we want some change in New Jersey politics, we're going to have to stop doing what we've always done. And it's time to stand up, speak out, and be heard, because these are dangerous times that we're in, and I'm here to serve you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Johnson, and I am a Democratic candidate for governor of this state. And I am more than delighted to see all of you here today, this evening. This is vitally important. For too long, the dominant party in this state has not been Democrat or Republican. It's been the couch party. It's been the people who stay home, the people who haven't been engaged. The last gubernatorial election had maybe 34% of the eligible voters participate. And what's happened since that time, what's happened in the last 6 months, is tremendously exciting. I marched with 7,000 people in Trenton on the day after President Trump was inaugurated. Because, why do I think this is so exciting? Because in this state, we've been run really with the insiders as opposed to the outsiders. Not Democrats and Republicans at senior leadership in Trenton, but the insiders and everyone else. My campaign has been about everyone else. I agree that our government has been broken, which is why I was the first and still the only candidate to propose comprehensive ethics reform, much of which can be done by the governor. That is critical, because we're not going to be able to solve our problems with high property taxes. Our problems in terms of getting our economy working, our trains moving, until we satisfy a fundamental requirement, I think, of government, which is that you can trust it, that the people who serve actually believe in service. This has been a quote that I've heard a lot. I first heard it from a famous political philosopher, Denzel Washington, who said this: to get something you've never had, you have to do something you never did. And when people step forward in an organized and powerful way, we're able to change things. Our small timekeeper has let me know that I'm running out of time. It's very important, because once I get wound up, I can go on for a bit. But here's the thing. We are running in a campaign in which one candidate has contributed more than $18 million, either has spent more than $18 million, much of it of his own money. And people have said it's impossible for us to be up against that, but we are. And here's the thing. The best answer to organized money is organized people. That's why I believe in campaign finance reform. That's why I have tried to be as inclusive in my campaign. And that's why if I'm elected governor, you will know that the State House is your house. It has always been your house. And I'm urging all of you to continue what you're doing, and let's reclaim it. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Mark Zinna, and I'm running for governor. And so as was mentioned earlier, I am a councilman in Tenafly, 2 terms, council president. I've been acting mayor until recently for about 6 months. And so I've served on both the executive side and the legislative side of delivering public services. And the reason I got into this race, frankly, I've been thinking about it for quite a while, but after the results of last year's presidential election, frankly, my wife got tired of me screaming at the television and throwing my shoes at the television and things like that. And I committed myself to getting into this race because the leadership of both the Republican and the Democratic parties at the state and the national level have really forgotten about the people. And we're basically left out there to dry while the moneyed interests and the oligarchs are slowly taking over our country. I was speaking with a few people, I'm going off script here, I was speaking with a few people a few minutes ago about what happened in the Texas legislature yesterday, where they were debating different bills to exclude undocumented immigrants from the state of Texas. And there were undocumented immigrants in the gallery attending the goings-on, and one of the state assembly people announced that he had just called ICE in order to have them removed from the Capitol building and deported. And what happened was the elected officials that theoretically are supposed to be doing the people's business started fighting and cursing at each other in public and almost came to fisticuffs. And it's time for the people, and we're the people, to start voting for different types of individuals. We can't put someone from Goldman Sachs in the Treasury Department and someone from Goldman Sachs in the New Jersey governor's office. Not that there's anything wrong with Goldman Sachs, but it's about the attitude people have when they run businesses versus when they run a government. And they're two very different things. You can't run government services like a business. It's not a business. When I put on my town council hat, I'm there to deliver and manage scarce resources, which are tax dollars, and provide services to people. And that's what's been forgotten. And that's what we have to get back to. You know, the important things in this race to me, number one, is all about the future. Healthcare is a fundamental human right. We need to respect the environment and invest in renewable technologies. And we need to have the right attitude, thinking about the future. While we respect the past and remember it, we have to keep moving forward and not be angry about the past and bring the right decisions and the right ideas to move things forward. Thank you.
So with that, we'll move to the moderated question and answer portion of this forum. So to start out, so you know that you're all here tonight speaking to the Indivisible 5th Congressional District Group, and the Indivisible Group is largely focused on resisting the Trump agenda. If you become governor, can you highlight some of the things that your administration will do to resist that agenda? And we're going to start with Jim Dawson.
Okay. Thanks. The next governor is going to have to do two things. Be focused on the state of New Jersey, but also be prepared to mount a very strong defense, because our values have been and will continue to be under assault with the Trump administration, with this current president. A few weeks ago, I announced what would be a 5-point strategy to deal with what's coming out of Washington. We call it the Trump Protection Plan, which there's nothing subtle about the name, because we need to be clear what I would plan to do. One is to protect the rule of law. We announced the plan after it came to light that Jim Comey had been fired, that the Attorney General wanted to reverse the progress that had been made with law enforcement reform and return to outdated policies of the war on drugs and tough on crime approaches that had such a devastating effect on communities and on individuals. But there are other elements of it. I've also said, so that's one, protecting the rule of law by appointing a strong Attorney General and by appointing judges that will protect the rule of law. Two is forming an immigration council to help protect communities and families that could be under assault and are under assault from ICE. The other elements include protecting health care, putting in place what I've called a family's bill of rights that includes raising the minimum wage, the living wage to $15 an hour, ensuring that we have paid sick leave. These are key elements of what would be a robust response to what's coming out of Donald Trump's administration. And the final piece deals with the environment. The governor can and should maintain our environmental standards. Right now, those are under assault, and Christie would have us have a race to the bottom. We can't have that, and as governor, I will prevent it.
I'm next? Okay. Thank you for the question. So several, I can go on for a laundry list for an hour with this. First thing I would do that comes to my mind is I would fully fund Planned Parenthood. I have 3 daughters, so this is a very important personal issue to me. Women's health care, women's economic opportunities, it's all tied in. I would fully fund that. In terms of the environment, I would not allow any more fossil fuel pipelines to be built in this state under any circumstances. I would use the power of my Attorney General to bring lawsuits against the federal government and any private actor who wanted to build pipelines in this state. And frankly, if I failed at those measures, unlike the governor of North Dakota who called out the National Guard against his own citizens, I would call out the National Guard to protect the citizens and protect the drinking water of half the population of this state to make sure our future is protected. And the third thing I would touch on, I'm proud to say, in Tenafly last month, we voted Tenafly to be a sanctuary city, and our colleagues on the Board of Education voted that our schools are sanctuary schools, so kindergartners and first graders don't have to show their papers when they show up. They go to school and they get educated because we want educated citizens in the future. And we would criticize over the issue of, you know, you can't have a sanctuary city because that's against the laws of the land. And I reminded my friends and neighbors that, you know, slavery was once the law of the land in this country also, and women didn't have the right to vote. That was the law of the land. So I would look towards making the state of New Jersey a sanctuary state and recognizing we have 500,000 people who live here and work here and pay taxes here and families who own homes here, and we need to protect those people. So these are the things that I would start with on my list to protect the people of this state.
Thank you so much. So,
I didn't answer the question. Okay. The four things that I think are most under assault with respect to the Trump administration are the environment, healthcare, our civil rights, and the rights of immigrants and undocumented immigrants to live a peaceful existence in our country. And with respect to the environment, I am fully in tune and fully in line with 3 of the 5 candidates who are scheduled to be here tonight. 3 of the 5 of us are unequivocally opposed to any new pipelines in the state of New Jersey. 2 of us, Mr. Johnson and Mr. Wisniewski, are not opposed to new pipelines in the state of New Jersey. And that's a problem for me, especially since they had the opportunity to give their position to the Coalition Against the Pilgrim Pipeline, and they chose to say that they would not oppose new pipelines in certain circumstances. Now, some things that have to be said are uncomfortable. Mr. Johnson works for a law firm that represents petroleum and natural gas and pipeline industries. Debevoise and Plimpton, right on their website, will tell you that they have a vast representation of these industries, pipelines, frackers, and the petroleum industry. And from that law firm alone, he collected more than 20 times what I am going to spend in this entire campaign. It's $200,000 from his own law firm. So when we talk about the corrosive effect of money in politics, we have to look at ourselves as well. With respect to health care, the Republicans have decided that tax cuts can be disguised as health insurance. And I can tell you this, if you're a New Jersey resident and you get a $30,000 tax cut as part of Trump Care, you're going to get an immediate and proportionate $30,000 tax increase as part of Brennan Care. You won't be able to complain that your taxes went up, but I'll be able to use 100 cents of those tax dollars to protect the weakest and most vulnerable among us who are going to lose if they're allowed to fall through the cracks at the hands of a negligent governor. With respect to civil rights and sanctuary states, I suspect we'll get to those questions soon, but I'm a progressive.
thank you. So we now have an additional candidate among us.
I think just out of fairness, Senator Van Wisniewski, the candidates had 2 to 3 minutes to do an introductory statement. You do it in like a minute and a half, and then we'll give the question for you.
I'll be even briefer than that. First of all, my apologies for being late. As ironic as this sounds, as the chair of the Transportation Committee, got caught in traffic, and therefore I'm late. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to share my views about the state of New Jersey and what is important about this election that's coming up in just a week. You have an important opportunity to change the direction not only of government in New Jersey, but of politics in New Jersey, and you're faced with an incredible array of choices. And I would ask you to consider the fact that New Jersey government is complicated, and the fact that we need to have a leader in New Jersey government that understands how government works. I have 21 years of experience as a legislator, but more than just experience as a legislator, I have a proven track record of standing up to the special interests and the party bosses during that 21 years, whether it was standing up against John Corzine, who wanted to sell the Parkway or the Turnpike. I saved jobs and I prevented an 800% toll increase, or more recently standing up against Chris Christie when he used the George Washington Bridge as a political tool to exact punishment against a mayor who wouldn't endorse it. That's the kind of leadership that New Jersey needs, and that's the kind of leadership I'm offering. And I think I came in under time.
So we would also like to give you an opportunity to answer the first question that we posed to the rest of the candidates,
Sure.
which is that you're speaking to the Indivisible group today, a group that's devoted to resisting the Trump agenda. So could you tell us what you would do as governor to resist the Trump agenda?
There's a number of things that we need to start with. First of all, we need to make sure that we have a strong-willed and a tough Attorney General who is going to follow the principles that I set forth as governor to not provide any aid, assistance, or comfort to the Trump administration in some of the policies that they're talking about right now. The immigration policy, for instance. I had a grandfather who came here a century ago as an undocumented immigrant. And Felix Wisniewski was not the kind of guy that the Trump administration was looking for then or now. The fact of the matter is we know what that policy is. It's racist, and it's geared towards one religion and one set of people, and we can't allow that to continue. I would make New Jersey a sanctuary state. The fact of the matter is even the Trump administration is finding out that their big words about what they would do to punish municipalities is not meeting with the reality of what the law is or what they can really do. I would make sure, in addition to that, that we are funding those issues that the Trump administration is already threatening to defund, whether it's Planned Parenthood, whether it is a woman's right to choose, whether it is education. We have to recognize that our values are at stake, the values of what we want to see government do. And while we can bemoan the fact that the federal government under a Trump administration may want to remove funding or curtail funding, we have to have the conviction to stand up and fund those elements that the Trump administration would remove from our state. And I would be committed to doing that as governor.
Thank you. I have a very quick follow-up. At least two of you have mentioned that you, part of what's essential to resisting the Trump agenda is appointing a strong attorney general. Do you have a specific name in mind? I'll start with you.
Sure. I don't have a specific name in mind, but I can tell you how, based on my prior experience in government, I would go about the task. So, really quick.
So this is just a quick,
So
not
no
a full question, not
specific,
2 minutes, just quick 10 seconds. Do you have a name in mind?
no specific name in mind.
I have no specific name.
I have an individual in mind, and she is a prosecutor in Essex County.
I haven't asked that individual, I don't want to announce it here. I have him in mind, but
Fair
I don't want him
enough.
to find out on Facebook Live.
Okay, so my second real question for each of you is, last week, Moody's put out a new report saying that if the state does not implement structural budget changes, New Jersey's annual operating deficit would rise to $3.6 billion by 2023, which they said is equivalent to 34% of sales taxes and 22% of gross income taxes, making it unlikely that a sufficient tax increase would be politically feasible. As governor, how would you address this large budget shortfall? Please try to be specific about what kinds of tax increases or spending reductions you might find acceptable. And we'll start with Councilman Zinna.
Sure, thank you for the question. So I'll go right into what I have done as a council member and council president for the past 6 years. We have balanced 6 municipal budgets with no layoffs, subject to the 2% cap that was put on top of us. And we did that. How did we do that? We did that because we planned for the future. When we purchased fire equipment or police cars or police equipment, we have an 11 to 30-year capital plan of what our needs are and what we're going to do. So we make very intelligent purchases. When we talk about the Department of Public Works, we plan out for the future 5 to 7 years ahead. We take into consideration the retirement schedules of our current employees when we're looking at hiring people, because I personally don't like firing people. It's not an enjoyable thing to do, but sometimes we are forced to reduce our workforce, and we do it through attrition, which is a fair thing to do. And so I would use those same skills and those same behaviors at the state level, and rather than looking at every quarter and only another 12 months in advance, we would look at decades down the road. We did some things to change in our town of Tenafly terminal leave. So when people retired, they got their pensions, of course, but left over from the 1960s and the 1970s, people got a big check at the end of their 30 years of service. So we changed that for new employees. New employees after a certain date wouldn't get that. We protected the current people who were made their promises, but for new people, we changed it. And they knew that when they came in. And those savings will affect our borough starting about 20 years from now. So it won't do any good for our administration, but we did it for the future administrations. And it's that type of thinking I would bring to the state, because that's what the state needs, that sort of discipline.
Thank you. Mr. Brennan?
I want you to pay very close attention to the answers that you get that follow mine. Keep in mind that we shorted our pension system $2.5 billion for this year. And because of that, we suffered our 11th consecutive credit downgrade. This is the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. Well, I'm here to talk about it because I'm the only candidate who raises enough money to meet that pension obligation in addition to the other obligations that we have. So I have a solution to the pension crisis, which includes moving money from the Social Security Trust Fund, which we can do, into the pension system without raising taxes. I intend to include a millionaire's tax in my budget, which raises the taxes on people who make more than $750,000 a year by 2%. I intend to put that inheritance tax that we got shoved down our throat as part of the gas tax to reinstate it, because it affects a very small percentage of the population and it costs us a lot of money. I intend on getting rid of corporate tax loopholes, corporate tax credits, pilot programs, this bonanza that they're saying if we don't compete with other states, we're going to lose the corporations. Well, we're between New York City and Philadelphia. We have the highest educated workforce in the country. We are not going to lose anybody to one of the states where they don't read past the 6th grade, they don't have a port, and they don't have highways, and they don't have 2 major markets. If you're a corporation in New Jersey, the CEO makes 100 times more than the median pay of the employees in your company, your corporation is going to pay a 10% surcharge. We're going to legalize cannabis as an industry, and we're going to put people to work in that industry, and we're going to tax it, and we're going to give these jobs to people making $15 an hour minimum wage. Remember, because it is an intra-state product by virtue of the fact that it can't cross federal borders, state borders, every job, from the seed to the harvest, to the bakery, to the candy factory, to the paraphernalia, is a Jersey job. So when it comes to infrastructure plans, we have been myopic. Every one of our infrastructure programs has been designed poorly, and I have a plan to save $40 billion in infrastructure. Every new rail station that we build will have revenue-producing rental properties along the platform, and will incorporate clean, renewable energy. I'm out of time, but I have more on this if you're interested later.
Thank you.
Our fiscal problem is awful, unless it's worse than awful. And but it's a structural problem. To deal with the structural problem, you need a structural response. Part of which goes to the structure of our government, and part of it goes to the process by which we put our budgets together. We do our budgeting and our revenue estimates in the dark. Many states do not. And so you as taxpayers don't really have a clear view of where the money is going, other than at the end of the year we find we've got another shortfall. So I'd adopt a transparent budgeting process, which would make in that process you'd have to make the forecasts, that is your revenue projections, transparent, have a neutral party establish them, because we can't keep going year after year after year, as we have for the last 7 years, finding out that at the end of the day, as we did 2 weeks ago, we have a $500 million budget shortfall. That is unsustainable. Then, in terms of dealing with the structures, getting beyond the process, we have 565 municipalities, and we should have shared services agreements. These are changes that will not, shared service agreements moves towards consolidation. While they won't solve all of the budget problems, they are a help. I have proposed reinstating part, at least, of the estate tax, which again created a budget problem for us, as well as the millionaire's tax, which again created a budget problem for us. But the other things that we need to look at, the money that we're getting from Washington, $1.3 billion we lost over the last 7 years because the governor's office couldn't seem to manage that. We couldn't comply with federal requirements. Our ethics rules, the ethics rules that I proposed, that would eliminate no-bid contracts,
On conservative talking points that have been proven not to work. I was one of the few legislators that stood on the floor of the Assembly when we considered the gas tax and the estate tax cut. And I said at that time, if we go ahead and reduce our state revenue at that time by $1.2 billion, we will be short at the end of this fiscal year, which we are, and we would suffer another credit rating downgrade, which we did. So part of New Jersey's solution to the problems we have is to reverse the bad decisions that have been made. I would reinstate the estate tax, which could generate $600 million. I would create a millionaire's tax, which could generate $1.1 billion. We also cut the sales tax, 1/8 of a penny. I know that you all have been saving up those 1/8 of a penny, but for the state budget, it means $600 million. Now we're at over $2 billion. We have corporate tax loopholes that cost us $300 million. And with a sale and legalization of marijuana, we could get that number up to $2.7 billion. But it can't just be on increasing revenue to the state. It has to be about also increasing our economy. We have a clean energy fund where we used to use it to subsidize the installation of solar and alternative energy. We created thousands of jobs statewide, which created hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax collection. We lost that when the governor used that money to balance the budget. So it's a combination between restoring some of the fiscally prudent decisions that were made, plus growing our economy by investing in clean energy and transportation, that we can raise the money that's necessary to fund all of our obligations.
We're going to start, Assemblyman Wisniewski, with you to get us
Sure.
back on the correct order. So, that's okay. So my question to the candidates is, what would you do to expand voting rights in New Jersey? So some examples that other states have either implemented or discussing: automatic voting registration when, for example, you go apply for a driver's license, early voting, voting rights for parolees. It's also the issue of how prisoners are counted within the districts where they're imprisoned, or same-day registration.
All of those are important issues, and so I sponsored the legislation in Jersey that would have created same-day registration, as well as would have created early voting in voting machines. Of course, Governor Christie did not support that, and so we're back at square one. I believe in same-day voter registration. The opportunity to vote ought not be limited because of some artificial time deadline that may have made sense before computers, but makes no sense today. We need to expand the opportunity to vote at machines by having extended voting periods, as many other states do. We need to further liberalize the ability to get a vote by mail ballot. While we've liberalized it some, there's still more we can do. But we also have to recognize there's a vote security or vote integrity issue. We have electronic voting machines. Those electronic voting machines, a professor at Princeton University has looked at them and has determined that they are capable of being reprogrammed without anyone knowing. And that reprogramming could skew an election. So what we need to have are optical scan ballots where you actually have a paper ballot that you fill out, it gets scanned. The numbers are tallied electronically, but there's always a piece of paper that records your vote and can be viewed for verification purposes. But the last thing we need to do is make sure that people are engaged in the process. We can create all of the options to get people involved and give them the opportunity to vote, but we also have to make sure that they look at the system as being fair, which means we have to get money out of the system. We have to limit the influence of big money in elections. We see one candidate spending $18 million, 4 times the amount of everybody else in the race combined. It's obscene and it has to stop.
Thank you. Councilman Zinna?
Sure, thank you. So several issues. Yes, I think we need automatic voter registration when you're 18 years old, whether it's through high school or when you get your driver's license. I believe if someone is in prison, I'm not really clear why they lose their right to vote to begin with. I think people in prison should have the right to vote because, and certainly when they get out of prison, they have paid their debt to society, because you want people becoming part of society again and being invested in society. And so that's that's one thing we can do there, and that's a social justice issue. I think we have to return to the concept more broadly of one person, one vote, which means, to me, is all about campaign finance. Gubernatorial elections should be done and financed with public money because it's in the public's best interest. And if we decide not to do it with public money and we still want people to be able to make contributions, that's fine too, but the only people who should be allowed to contribute to a gubernatorial campaign in this state is an individual who has the ability and the right to vote. No corporations, no political action committees, no unions, no union bosses being able to control what goes on and who gets elected. I also think we need open primaries in this state. So when you go into that booth, you get to vote for the candidate you want to vote for, not someone the party bosses have dictated is supposed to be the lead candidate. And one person, one vote is the thing we need to return back to.
Thank you. Mr. Brennan?
Now to something completely different. I would do away with the entire process that we have in New Jersey. It is broken. All the complaints that we have can be solved in the following fashion. The first case, anybody over the age of 18 is automatically registered to vote under my administration. If you don't want to be a registered voter, you can fill out a form and opt out. It should be the other way around. We shouldn't make it a task to become registered to vote. We should make it a task if you want to opt out, if you want to declare that you're not a good citizen and unregister yourself, you can go do that. But under my administration, you'll be a registered voter automatically, and your ballot will go to the address of record that we have on file for you. Everybody will get a ballot under my administration, and you'll have it at your home. And it'll be a Scantron, and you can fill it out. And when you send it back at any time during election month, at the end of that month when the ballots are cast, they can be examined. The process can be watched and viewed. There'll be a paper record of it. Everybody will vote. In states that have done this, the voter participation has gone to 71%, 80% in some cases. Now that's what we want. The party bosses don't want big turnout because they have a select few people that will do what they are told to do it when they're told to do it. Now, as far as campaign finance reform, I don't believe that you should be able to contribute to anybody in this election, and I don't believe that I should be able to spend my own money. I think that the state of New Jersey should allocate resources for every candidate in every race. You might think it's expensive, but what we have now is far more expensive because everything that gets done is a transaction. Everywhere you go, somebody's got an envelope in a diner or a campaign contribution or a super PAC or some vested interest that is funneling money to all of the candidates except for Mark and I. And this is a problem. And anybody who's sitting on $3 million who tells you that money in politics is a problem should explain where they got the $3 million. Now, I'm all about getting everybody to vote. And that's what my plan does, and other states have done it. So I hope we can come into the future and do it here.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
This is a vital question. I've worked on voting rights issues for probably now 16, 17 years. As chair of the Brennan Center for Justice, we talked about a couple of different things. I was co-counsel representing a class of 600,000 people formerly incarcerated who had been denied the access to vote in Florida with a set of rules that dated back to Reconstruction. I helped get a group of voters both in Colorado and Florida back on the rolls, and unfortunately lost that case, but some fights are worth having even when you lose. I helped get groups of voters back on the rolls in Colorado and in Florida who had been illegally purged from the rolls just before the elections. So this is an issue that is core to me. Within the state, I've been an advocate for voting reform, for automatic voter registration when you turn 18. And I have, as part of my ethics plan, there's a democracy piece as well that aims to expand democracy and try to make it a reality in the state in which in many of our conceptions of democracy have been turned on their head. In addition to some of the voting changes and registration changes, and I agree with much that has been said, I would also look at the way our ballots are designed. Our ballots are designed with the input essentially of the party bosses, where one person gets the line, where you have to petition, even if you've been a lifelong Democrat, to have Democrat attached to your name on the ballot. That is something that needs to change so that people feel from not only the registration process, but to the time they mark their ballot, that they have a free and unfettered choice in this matter. When we have a choice and we have a voice, our democracy will be better. And that would be one of the changes that I would propose, in addition to many of the others.
Thank you. The next question deals with education. Between Governor Christie, our Federal Secretary of Education, and this White House, there's less financial support for public institutions, while higher education is becoming more and more expensive. How would you better support colleges and make higher education more affordable? Mr. Brennan.
Well, I'd love to sit here and tell you that the state of New Jersey has the resources to give free college tuition to everybody making under $125,000 a year. But I've done the math, and with a $2.5 billion deficit to the pension system alone, the figures that Mr. Wisniewski brought up earlier leave $200 million for all the progressive programs that we're going to save from Christie's cuts over the past 8 years. That $200 million that he has got left over after the pension is paid, I'm at $1.9 billion because I get 1.7 from the pension plan. I have $1.9 billion to do infrastructure spending, to protect people who've lost their health insurance, and to do all manner of things like refunding Planned Parenthood. And from those resources, the $1.9 billion that I have identified specifically on my website and here in front of you, because remember earlier when I said, where are they getting the pension money from? Nobody answered that yet, and that should be your question, because that is the question. I solved the pension crisis with $1.7 billion. I need another $800 million from that same $2.7 billion that Mr. Wisniewski has identified. So that leaves me with $1.9 billion to fund higher education. What I can do is fully fund higher education to the standard that it was before. I can offer interest-free student loans to students that go to public institutions of higher learning. I cannot give free tuition, not when I plan on making us the first state in the nation to be 100% reliant on renewable energy, not when I plan on completely overhauling our infrastructure with new bridges and mass transit lines and a new bus terminal and a new Penn station all in one place. I can't do all of those things. I want to come back here in 4 years and ask you to vote for me again, and I don't want you to say I didn't keep my promises. I've done the math. Free college tuition, Medicare for all, the pension program, the environmental program. If you're promising all of those things, you're getting none of them. And that's just the reality. I'm sorry I can't tell you what you want to hear.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes. So budgeting is about values and choices, and it's about setting goals. I did that when I was Under Secretary of the Treasury, and I was overseeing a budget of $4.6 billion with the Secret Service and the Customs Service and the ATF. And we had many great goals, worried about the security of the president, worried about the security of our borders, worried about safety in our streets. You couldn't achieve all of them, but you could set certain standards. You couldn't get all the money for everything. For me, dealing with the issue of college affordability is a personal one, because I didn't finish paying my last college loan until I was 35 years old. And there are students now leaving college that have enormous debts. So we definitely need to deal with the issue of loans, and sometimes usurious rates that are being charged to these students after they leave college. That's one area that we're going to have to deal with. I have said that I want to provide funding. I know we can't provide it right away for free tuition for junior colleges or vocational school for families making under $90,000 a year. I understand that we can't do all of this at once, and we have a huge fiscal crisis, but we need to set some goals that are reach goals that we're going to work to achieve, rather than simply trying to fix yesterday's problems. I've proposed also a college program, a funding program that would be like ROTC, where in exchange for work for the state
matter, I would completely turn the whole tuition payment process on its head. And rather than our children having to take out, well, mom and dad can write the check, they can write the check, that's wonderful for that family. But most students have to take out student loans, and they do it up front, and then they sign their future away for 15 to 20 years. And then they move out of state to get higher paying jobs if there's not enough opportunities here. So I would change that. I would make college tuition payable on the back end. So you get into the college, and then what happens is your tuition payment is based on your ability to pay when you come out of college after you've graduated and you get a job. Let's say, for instance, you work on Madison Avenue or Wall Street after you graduate. Well, 5% of your income will go towards your college tuition for the next 15 years after you graduate. And if you decide, instead of working on Madison Avenue, you want to go out and save the world and perhaps build houses in Appalachia for people who need homes, and you only make $10,000 a year, well, you'll pay 5% of whatever that particular paycheck is for you. Now, this accomplishes two things. One, it doesn't burden our young people with an absurd amount of debt. It burdens them with debt that is manageable, that they can repay over time. And the second thing it does is it gives colleges and universities the incentive to make sure they are teaching our kids real-world skills that they can use when they graduate from college. Right? We're paying millions of dollars a year in some instances to sports coaches, to presidents of universities. We need to refocus higher education to be about education for our kids and using the resources we have in a way that does not burden them but sets them up for success in life.
Thank you. So another issue that has come up frequently in our Indivisible meetings is the issue of healthcare at the federal level and single-payer healthcare. So it's one thing to implement single-payer at the federal level, but another to implement it at the state level, and some of you have discussed that. So I want to ask all of you more generally, what's your healthcare plan for the state of New Jersey, and how would it be paid for, especially if the Republicans succeed in repealing Obamacare? And we'll start with you, Mr. Johnson.
So the first thing is that video. And one of the things that I think all of us are grateful to Indivisible and other groups is that Trump got effectively Trump the first time they tried to repeal the ACA. And now they look like they can't organize a two-car motorcade to repeal it again. But something bad is going to happen. My first proposals around health care have involved reducing the cost of pharmaceuticals. But if the ACA goes away and 500,000 New Jerseyans lose health care coverage, we're going to have to adopt a much different approach. I am prepared to work with the legislature to develop an affordable, rather a single-payer plan. Not all of us have moved to a single-payer plan, but we can't move to a spot in which 500,000 New Jersey residents have again lost their health care. The challenges that I see are significant because we have an awful fiscal situation. In some respects, it could become catastrophic if we had to deal with a complete repeal of affordable health care. But then the choice process that I discussed before, where we're going to have to make difficult choices about what gets funded, we'll have to go through that. If health care is an essential human right, and I believe it is, then some of the other things that have been proposed on the table, we may not be able to afford, and we'll have to, in the near term or the long term, and we'll have to pull that back because that has to be one of our priorities.
Thank you. What's happening in Washington is disconcerting. We worked, going back since Bill Clinton first took office, to do something about health care on a national level. Back in the day, when President Clinton was in office, there wasn't a national appetite to actually get something done. Fast forward to the first term of President Obama, and we got the Affordable Care Act done. But that Affordable Care Act, while it has done enormous good for New Jersey, 500,000 people being covered who did not have coverage before, we see an active effort to repeal it, damage it, do something to it. So we need to look at how do we protect New Jersey residents. We can create a state-based single-payer healthcare system. This is not a novel idea anymore. The New York Assembly has voted out a bill to create a single-payer healthcare system. The Senate is poised to do that in New York. California's assembly is considering legislation, and they have the votes to do it there. So this is no longer something that is unheard of. States are actively doing it. How do we do it in New Jersey? We have 3 pots of money. We have our federal Medicaid dollars and other federal resources that come into the state. We have our state-paid resources, whether it is dollars that go to pay the state health benefits program, to pay retirees, but all of those state resources coupled with the premiums. There's a tax that everybody pays right now. They're called premiums. Employers pay it, employees pay it. You put all of that money together in a pot. Let's look at the numbers. Every year in New Jersey, $55 billion is paid out to hospitals and doctors and providers. Yet, every year in New Jersey, all of those sources of money total $63 billion. That 15% difference is the amount that the insurance industries and CEOs take as their cut out of the healthcare system. Doesn't provide one Band-Aid or aspirin, but it provides a lot of cushion for CEOs. By having a single-payer system, we cut out that middleman, we save that money, and we can provide the same level of service cheaper or better level of service with the existing resources.
My turn? Okay, so, I saw that healthcare is a fundamental human right. I mean, even Richard Nixon believed in a single-payer healthcare system. And of course, President Roosevelt did also. But Roosevelt was ahead of his time. And, we feel so strongly about this. We brought a healthcare consultant over from Denmark. His name is Pelle Jorgensen, to help us with our single-payer healthcare policy. Now, Denmark has had a single-payer system since prior to World War I, over 100 years. Now, their costs annually are between 9 and 10% of their GDP. But right now in New Jersey, from all the pots of money, all the way we pay for health care and prescription drugs, it costs the state, costs us about 18% of our GDP. We already have the money. We're already spending it with this ridiculous system we have that we're trying to figure out how to make better. You can't make it better, it needs to go away. And so we can't, the money is there, we just need to change our thinking and the way we pay for it in a practical sense, how we get that money into one pot. We do it the same way that we do Social Security. Our employer pays a percentage, the employee pays a percentage, and everyone in the state of New Jersey will get covered. Again, we're spending more than we need to be spending in order to do it. And everyone in this state will be covered. It will actually make New Jersey residents more competitive and more desirable to employers, because we're lifting, the burden is spread out to 100% of the people. So if you want to go out and start a new business, you're a young person, you're getting out of college, and instead of getting a job because you need insurance, you go out and start a business. Because guess what? Your health care is covered. It would be excellent for the economy of the state of New Jersey, and there's places in the world that is already successful, it's already going on, we don't even need to reinvent the wheel. Thank you.
Mr. Brennan.
And now for a lesson in math. Those are all good intentions and great ideas, and if we didn't have a fiscal crisis that required us to conduct emergency measures, we might be able to tackle Medicare for all at a state level. But what's left out of the equation is right now there are nearly 1.2 billion people in the state of New Jersey, $1.2 million unemployed. So we're giving them insurance. You can't take a premium from somebody that isn't already paying. The unemployment rate is 4%. We have uninsured people at 1.2 billion. We're talking about taking the profits from insurance companies and using that to insure 1.2 billion people. Insurance for 1.2 million people. I'm sorry, 1.2 million people, but the dollars for that are billions of dollars to provide annual health insurance for that many people. You're talking about the people that work in New York State. You cannot get their employers and the people that work in Pennsylvania, you cannot force their employers to contribute to your state's health benefits program. So we have to be realistic. Now, I have a different proposal. I propose that we start by socializing the profit centers. I'm not saying if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. I'm saying if you like your EKG monitor, well, develop a relationship with somebody else. If you like the CAT scan technician, if you like the the MRI technician, if you like your phlebotomist who's drawing blood, you know what? The state can provide all of those services. And when the state provides those services, it takes an incredible amount of money and profit out of the hands of for-profit dialysis centers, for-profit CAT scan centers, for-profit MRI centers, for-profit phlebotomists, and uses that profit to insure everyone and to lower costs for everyone, because that is a reasonable step in the right direction. I believe in single payer nationwide. I think it's like when they started passing hands-free cell phone rules in each town, and they were about a year ahead of the state, and the state made it a statewide ban on talking on your cell phone. So now you have a hodgepodge of rules of towns here and there that went through the trouble and the legislative hurdle. Remember, it takes a lot of legislative effort to make these giant changes. And if we want to be the first state to be renewable energy compliant, we want to have infrastructure, we want to have tuition-free, I'm sorry. These are nuanced answers. They require more than a minute.
Well, the good news is you're going to get the next question, because I'm going to go a little bit out of order, because I want to talk about a comment that made a little bit of news earlier this month that you made at an event. You said that you would pardon every single nonviolent offender if the legislature did not do something to stop the problem of mass incarceration. So my question to you is, to avoid pardoning every nonviolent offender, what specific legislation would you need passed? And then for everyone else, the question is, how would you address mass incarceration?
Well, it's a radical answer. I would completely end the war on drugs. The war on drugs is a racist construct that carries forward from Jim Crow days, from Reconstruction, when we had least labor. And as I said at that same forum, what we had when the 13th Amendment was enacted, it said that slavery shall be illegal except as punishment for crime. So they created a construct where black people could be put in jail and then leased out to their former owners. And that has carried forward. And under the Nixon administration, they decided that they would declare a war on drugs, and they associated heroin and cocaine with the ghettos and the African American communities, and they associated marijuana and hallucinogenics with the hippies, and what they had in common was a dislike for war and a dislike for conservative Republican politics. They have now admitted, Lee Atwater has been quoted as saying they knew it was all a lie, and it was designed to get at the people they didn't like politically. So because of that, we have somebody like Jim Johnson, who was a United States attorney in the Southern District of New York, who prosecuted these people and put them in jail, sometimes for mandatory minimum terms of imprisonment that have no basis in reality. Somebody who's using drugs is not my enemy. He is a sick person. He or she is a sick person. This is a mental health problem. This is a disease problem. This is not a crime problem. What we've done by making these things illegal is we've invited a criminal element into our country. Prohibition created Al Capone. Prohibition is creating all kinds of drug cartels that are using violence, not because they're addicted to drugs, but because they're protecting their drug turf. So under my administration, in addition to legalizing cannabis, I'm going to decriminalize at the state level drug use and drug possession. And we are going to take those people and take the resources that we've been using to hound and harass and incarcerate and waste money, and we're going to use it for real crimes like human trafficking and official misconduct and bribery and extortion and all manner of things that are truly destroying the state of New Jersey. And we're going to treat the people who need to be treated. And we're going to take the profit out of the hands of the drug cartels.
Thank you, Mr.
So, as I understand the rules of this procedure, we're not going into a back and forth. Let's say my silence is that how my history has been characterized does not mean that I've accepted it. I first got the talk.
You can address it.
But I'll address it, but I'll focus my 2 minutes on what I think is vital. I first got the talk when I was 6 years old. And my mother told me that if I was going to pick up something from the store, not only did I need to make sure that I paid for it, but when I walked out, I needed to make sure that I had it in a bag and I had a receipt for it. I got a second version when I got my driver's license, and I was told, if you are stopped, make sure you have 10 on the wheel, that you comply and you go forward. I grew up with a strong sense that the criminal justice system was not fair, and I joined it in the hopes that I could help reform it. And so among the things that I've done in my career, which goes back decades with law enforcement, both as a citizen and on the outside, is I worked to make sure that we were able to diversify Treasury law enforcement when I was a law enforcement, when I was heading Treasury law enforcement, including at the senior levels. In New Jersey, I worked to deal with the issue of racial profiling. Having been profiled myself as a youngster, I worked to help the Attorney General and the state troopers develop rules to ensure that when you were on the highways, no matter what your color, you were treated with fairness. With the Brennan Center for Justice, I helped form a group called Law Enforcement Leaders to Reduce Crime and Incarceration. We had a 4-point program, which I would want to see implemented in this state, that dealt with early intervention, dealt with alternatives to incarceration, eliminating mandatory minimums, changing our crimes, such as things like the recreational use of marijuana are no longer criminalized, and most importantly, in putting in place community policing, because I have always held that law enforcement should be part of the communities they serve rather than apart from them. That increases safety and increases engagement, and it makes us a better society, and it reduces incarceration.
Go ahead.
So addressing mass incarceration obviously starts with something very simple. Decriminalizing and legalizing marijuana and creating a framework in which it can be sold and possession is normalized. But it's more than just that. We have to recognize that mass incarceration arises from a variety of problems that we have in our criminal justice system. We have mandatory minimums. Under a misguided policy that somehow creating those kind of mandatory minimums makes us safer, and we've seen the proof that it doesn't. And we need to have a strong policy to roll back that, and we see it every single day in the legislature. People still come out with bills to create mandatory sentences under some misguided thought that it's going to make people safer. And all we see it does is it makes life more unfair, particularly for communities of color. We also have to recognize that we have for-profit prisons in New Jersey. We need to end for-profit prisons to make our justice system fair. Nobody should be earning a profit on locking people up. We need to make sure that we have a greater level of accountability with the police departments, which means body cameras across the state, as well as civilian complaint review boards, so that when the use of force is questioned, it's just not insiders deciding whether or not it was appropriate, but civilians who get an opportunity to weigh in on whether or not the use of force was correct. And finally, let's not forget our municipal court system that is used far too often as a revenue center for municipalities. And unfortunately, what happens is people who get in front of a municipal court judge who can't make the fine, who can't pay, wind up being incarcerated because they don't have the financial circumstances. You have to change that as well. We have to make sure the criminal justice system is reformed from top to bottom and not just in small pieces. We have to provide justice for everybody and not just a few.
Thank you. So, a couple of things. First, the war on drugs is a complete failure. Fundamentally, it turns out to be something designed to put Black and Latino men inside of prisons, and a whole bunch of people get to make money on that. Frankly, no one should be in a prison unless it's the result of a violent crime. You know, why marijuana is illegal is beyond me. It should be fully legal, regulated, and taxed. Because frankly, when my friends and I go out and we have a scotch, there's no moral difference between that and someone who is smoking a joint in the privacy of their home or wherever they are. So marijuana needs to be legalized. Cocaine, heroin needs to be decriminalized. Not that you don't want to make that legal, you're not going to encourage the use of that, but it should be decriminalized so that no one goes to prison for using those drugs. They're addicted to the drugs. They need to be in a hospital, a medical center, a treatment center to help them get off of those drugs. Now, we also need to decriminalize poverty. You get a traffic ticket, you can't afford to pay the traffic ticket, you skip the court date because you don't have the cash, the next thing you know, there is a warrant out, you're getting arrested, and now you're a criminal. That is fundamentally wrong. It should not go on. The traffic ticket should stay a traffic ticket, a civil matter, we figure out a way that people can pay it off over time and they go about their life. We shouldn't be taking away people's driver's licenses when they can't afford to pay fines. It's so ridiculous. How are they going to get to work in the state of New Jersey in order to pay their fines? So we need to turn our view of these things around. Decriminalize certain drugs, legalize marijuana, and decriminalize poverty.
I want to clap.
Two things. In all the countries,
Well, we're going to open up the
Yeah.
audience.
We're getting there, we're getting there.
So for the sake of time, I mean, I have a bunch more questions because it's Madeline. But I'm going to give you a quick one so that we can finish this portion and then open up to the audience. If you can, name 2 people that you are considering to be your lieutenant governor, and would you consider any one of your fellow candidates who are either here or not here? Mr. Zinna.
Okay, so there is one particular candidate, one of my fellow candidates that I would consider for lieutenant governor, but I'm not going to name the person. And I do have 2 other people, one from South Jersey, and we are considering her, and someone else from North Jersey and Berkeley County, as a matter of fact, and I am in conversations with him, but I can't release any names because they would be very surprised to see that on Facebook Live right now.
And would you consider any one of your co-candidates?
Yes, there is one I would consider.
Okay. Mr. Brennan?
Well, if Stephen Colbert is listening, I would consider him as lieutenant governor, and if he wasn't available, I'd ask Bruce Springsteen. I would be happy to have Mark Zinna or Ray Lesniak as my lieutenant governor if I won the nomination. I've just been listening to them for months now, and they are genuine people. They care about what they're talking about, and I have a lot of respect for them. So either one of them, in my view, would be a great lieutenant governor and be a help to me governing the state.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
I can tell you what I would look for in a lieutenant governor. I don't have a list of names. We are a broad and diverse state, and too often our leadership does not reflect that. And so what I would want is a governor, lieutenant governor, who reflects first the geographic diversity of the state. So I really would am committed to having someone from the southern part of the state. One of the things you find out when you campaign is that the southern part of the state feels often like folks feel like stepchilds. They feel like they're the other New Jersey, the forgotten New Jersey, and there's no better signal that I would want to lead one state is to have someone from South Jersey as part of the ticket. And then I would also look to diversity of background, and that doesn't mean just either gender or ethnicity, but all too often in too many places, and you see it in the extreme version in Washington, is that you have simply wealthy people, insiders, that occupy the top positions, and we need to have a broad gauge diversity with our leadership in the state, and that's the way I would want to not only choose my lieutenant governor, but also the way I'd want the cabinet to work.
And would you consider any of your co-candidates that are either here or not here?
I'm open-minded.
Assemblyman Wisniewski?
Thank you very much. Very interesting question. I think at this point in time, it's a little premature to start naming names for positions that require you to win the election first. But I will tell you how I would view those choices. First of all, we have to have a cabinet, and lieutenant governor is going to be a cabinet position. The current lieutenant governor has a cabinet office. The requirement is that the person you name is going to occupy one of those key cabinet positions. I would want to make sure that in filling out the cabinet that we have acknowledged experts in the variety of disciplines that make up the cabinet. And so when we're talking about the Department of Environmental Protection, we want an environmental scientist, somebody who has got avowed credentials in protecting our environment. When we're talking about transportation, we want a transportation professional who understands literally what it takes to make the trains and buses run on time, but also knows how to plan for the future growth of New Jersey's transportation infrastructure. When we talk about education, The Commissioner of Education has to be somebody that's actually seen the inside of a school, has taught in the class, and has the professional credentials and reputation to lead an education system. And I would want to assemble a cabinet of the best and brightest minds in New Jersey that represents the diversity of our state, both geographically, ethnically, regionally. We have so many unique treasures in this state, so many unique opportunities to choose people who have great accomplished careers. And from that cabinet, that team of qualified people, I would choose from that cabinet somebody to be the lieutenant governor, somebody that I feel is best suited to serve in the role of governor if I were not able to do that.
And would you consider any of your co-candidates?
I like Jim Johnson's answer. I'm open-minded.
Thank you very much. We're going to open up to the audience. You just raise your hand. Han,
Han Wolfman, Fairlawn. The question came up about the incarceration problems and the drug problem. Portugal is a country that had a very big and pressing drug problem. They, at some point, I don't know, about 10 years ago, I believe, completely decriminalized drug use. They went in for treatment. Their drug use has declined precipitously. The crimes have declined. The costs to society have declined. And Portugal is just one of the countries that have gone that route. And I would really hope that New Jersey would follow that lead. On the other hand, you're talking about incarceration and to not incarcerate anybody who has not committed a violent crime. There are some crimes, white-collar crimes, that go a little bit further than just smoking a joint, in my opinion. And I would like people who have really committed serious white-collar crimes to pay a price that includes incarceration. And then the last thing is, I would like I don't have a real question. I would like your opinion on these things. I would like to know whether there is a possibility to punish people financially in accordance with their means, rather than just $25 or $50 per partner, which is not going according to their means.
Okay, well, I raised the Portugal model recently. At the last event that we were at, I raised the Portugal model, and you're absolutely right. Their enforcement is down, the level of addiction is down, the number of people in recovery are way up, and the Portugal model is a success. So I'm 100% on board with adopting the Portugal model, and I'm on record as having said that. With respect to, I only want nonviolent drug criminals released. If you committed fraud, if you bamboozled somebody out of their life savings, if you bankrupted a pension fund with white-collar crime, I think you should have a more severe penalty, because you're people of means. You're not taking somebody's money to get food. You're taking somebody's money to get a Learjet. You're taking somebody's money. You're taking people's retirement. And we have a system that is set up by a phalanx of attorneys. If you're a white-collar criminal, you can go to Mr. Johnson and give him $15 an hour, $1,500 an hour, and get you out of that situation. And a guy like David Sampson, who committed extortion and bribery against the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, is going on vacation at the very home he extorted United Airlines into flying into. So there's a real dystopian nightmare going on in our justice system, and it needs to be dealt with. And as far as your last comment about a means testing, I clap for Mark, because some of the things he says are brilliant. And what he brings up about the people and the municipal cash registers is true. And I want to talk about John now, because John wanted red light cameras on every intersection, and that was a tax, a revenue producer for people. And the companies that contributed to the campaign there, they got caught shortening the yellow lights to catch people and fine them. $80 a ticket. No points on your license, just mail it in. Well, that's good. But you know what? When my 2007 car with 170,000 miles gets hit with an $80 surcharge, it cost me the same as somebody else's $400,000 Lamborghini. It's a tax and it's regressive.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Well, I'll make one note. So since we only have about 15 minutes left, we're not going to stick to the formal 2-minute time limit. Just try to be respectful and try to be as concise as you can so we can try to get as many questions from the audience as we can.
And if you have a specific candidate that you'd like to, be the one to respond.
Just really quickly, when I talked about the four points for reducing crime and incarceration, one of which is making sure the crimes fit the times. I think that that should be informed by the experience of other countries, like Portugal, as we move forward. Our system clearly hasn't worked. It has devastated communities, and we need to use the best practices from everywhere to get to a much better place than we are.
We have to recognize that our criminal justice system right now has an undue emphasis on drug crimes, and that locks up too many black and brown faces, and we have to get away from that, and that's why I would start with decriminalizing and legalizing marijuana, but there's much more we need to do. I agree with you that if you have defrauded people, if you have created white-collar crime, there's no reason for you to go free. You need to pay the price for the acts you've committed. But we have to recognize that there is a racial bias in our criminal justice system, and we need to work very hard to eliminate that.
I agree with you 100% on the Portugal model. That's where we need to be. We have to stop creating laws and with made-up crimes and putting people in jail for it. Portugal did the right thing. We can do the same thing here. So thank you for bringing that up. Your question about the white-collar crime issue, it can cost anywhere from $40,000 to $100,000 a year to keep an inmate in prison, and we pay for that. So I think we need to start looking at ways for potentially these individuals to be repaying society, be repaying their victims, right? Their assets are forfeited. We have to figure out a way to do justice to the people who have been cheated. So we need to open our mind, think about options other than purely incarceration when violence is not involved.
Hi, Eldon. So everyone's talking about reducing mass incarceration by ending the drug war, but on the state level, only a small fraction, somewhere between 10 and 20% of inmates are there solely on drug charges. For the most part, we incarcerate violent offenders, and we still, only considering violent offenders, we still have the largest prison population in the world. So is anyone here prepared to commit to reducing the prison population and reducing the length of the sentences for violent offenders?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is look at how do we get to the situation where we're actually arresting and trying and sentencing people for violent crimes. One of the first things we have to look at is the school-to-prison pipeline that is caused by our underinvestment in public education. We have to recognize that a number of people who wind up in that cycle are there because of the lack of economic opportunity and hope that they have in their own lives. And that's a failure of government to deliver the kind of quality opportunity that comes with educational attainment, that comes with a livable minimum wage, that comes with creating the economic opportunity that would give people an alternative. Otherwise, we're going to continue to repeat those same mistakes over and over again.
The one thing that I would add to that is this, and we haven't talked about this much, but in many communities, even those that are committing violent crimes, we want to get to the point of sort of intervening early, which is why point one of my program talks about early intervention. Part of that is dealing with the fact that many folks, particularly in our toughest communities, are traumatized. And traumatized people often do terrible things. You can talk to someone who has committed a violent crime, and when you ask, well, why did you do that? They actually don't have necessarily a good answer. Now, there are some people that the best place for them is removed from society. But the goal is to have not just a criminal justice system, but an education system that enables us to intervene early and then takes into account, both in our policies and our conduct, the impact of trauma, and introduces tools that have been used in places like Chicago, but also in New Jersey, around restorative justice which helps give young people some of the tools they need to short circuit that instantaneous response. And so again, let's start to deal with the issues earlier. By the time we get to arresting someone, from my perspective, it's too late.
Yeah, point well taken with respect to that, but a lot of the violence that we're experiencing, and a lot of the violence that is being prosecuted is gang violence fueled by drug trade. And if we eliminate the profit motive, remember, money is the root of all evil in society right now. Whether it's campaign finance reform, whether it's the environment, whether it's healthcare, it's somebody's greed. And greed is a problem. And when you have violent drug cartels that filter down, I mean, they are hierarchical just like a police department is. They have the Don or the captain, and they have a hierarchy, and they get orders. You protect that corner, or you protect this area, or you take this person out, or you steal from that person. And remember something, if you are a drug dealer and you are not violent, you are now like a Trump immigrant. You can't go to the police for police protection, so you are a ready-made victim. If somebody comes and steals your drugs or your drug money and they shoot you, you can't go and testify against them or talk about why it happened. So I think if we deal with this scourge of profit-making for drugs, we will tamp down the violence that's associated with it. There are crimes of passion that are always going to be that. There are psychotic people that should never see the light of day again because they're always going to be violent. But when it comes to gang violence, it is gang violence for a reason, and the reason is the war on drugs. Because somebody's got to be an enemy, and there's three sides to that war, and we're on the wrong side of every side.
Do I get to answer that question?
Yes.
So John mentioned that we have a school to prison mentality, and he's 100% right. And recently I was in Trenton, and I had reason to go. I had a meeting at the headquarters of the prison, the folks who run our prison system in the state of New Jersey. And it's a nice campus, it's all green, and there are inmates who are going to be released very soon who keep the lawn green and shovel the snow in the wintertime, that sort of thing. And next to prison headquarters is an elementary school, which was built only a few years ago, so it's in nice shape. And then next to the elementary school is like a middle school, high school, which is quite run down, surrounded by barbed wire fences. So basically, the cultural message that's going on there is you have a shot in elementary school, but by the time you go to middle school and high school, things are really looking bad, and the next stop, number 3, is going to be in prison. And of course, that prison complex there, that headquarters, other than the elementary school, is the nicest building in the neighborhood. And so, you know, we've allowed our cities to deteriorate, which is disgraceful, over the past 50 years. And we have this message out there that when you're done with school, we're going to send you to prison. And that whole cultural viewpoint needs to stop. So, excellent question.
I have real concern about voting. I'm very upset about the fact that our voter turnout is so low. How do you encourage people to get out to vote? I'm concerned that so many people don't even know how the government works. Don't they teach civics anymore in high school? And I know this sounds punitive, but if you get a traffic ticket or you do a motor violation, you have to take a remedial course. Why, if you don't vote, why don't you have to take a remedial course in civics?
Well, one of the things, if I could address that, is that, so we teach civics in 4th grade. We send all of our young boys and girls down to the State House. They give a tour of the state capitol. And when they're in 4th grade, they know that there are 120 legislators and 40 senators and 80 assemblymen. And by the time they get to high school and they're now getting the right to vote, they've forgotten that because it was so long ago. And I think we have to change when we're educating people about state government and civics. But I also think that we wrestled long and hard with this issue in the legislation. We had legislation the governor vetoed about creating opportunities for same-day registration, creating opportunities for early voting, doing all of those things. But we have to recognize that part of the problem we see here is the politics that turn so many people away from the voting booth. When they see a process in which party leaders get to rig the system and decide in advance before anybody else is even paying attention, people get turned off and they don't want to participate. And so the way to encourage more participation is to take the leadership and the power away from the party bosses and return it to the people. We have primary elections as a progressive reform from a century ago so that we did away with party conventions. Well, the party bosses figured out in that time how to recreate those conventions through a primary system in which they designate their favorite candidates and they shower them with money and support. I think that's part of the problem we're facing. So clearly better opportunities to vote and register and participate, but also better candidates and a system that's not rigged.
Really quickly, there are three factors, at least three factors, that affect voter participation. One said John just outlined, where people aren't apathetic, they're actually disgusted and have decided to turn off. And by making it easier to register, making it more transparent as to how the balloting process goes, dealing with campaign finance reform, it is an invitation back into the system. But voting is also a habit. Civic engagement is a habit. And so what we have seen over the years, as we have become busier, as we have really tried to disentangle ourselves, that's probably the wrong word, but people have become disengaged with civic institutions. Voting is part of a habit where we have come apart from each other. And we need leadership that really invites people back in and encourages it. The third thing that's unrelated is this. Voter participation and civic engagement is lowest in those communities where people have the worst commutes, where they have basically, it is so, and there's been statistical studies of what are the factors that affect civic engagement. And when your infrastructure is failing, when you aren't able to get to and from work, it is a signal from your government to you in a daily way, we don't care. And it also just makes it much more difficult for people to engage. So it would seem unrelated, but it's actually a part of the process.
So
We have to just,
I'm not gonna chance
no, 30 seconds,
Okay,
seriously,
good.
30 seconds. 'Cause we're running out of
every
time.
single problem that we've identified with your question is resolved if you get the ballot mailed to you automatically. Like I said, the states that have done this have gotten up to 80% voter participation, where you don't register, unless you have to unregister to get out, and your ballot comes to you, and it's in a self-addressed stamped envelope, and with that ballot, you choose to fill it out and send it back, and you don't have to wait in line, and you don't have to get home from work on a work day early. You don't have any of those problems. You just have your ballot sent to you, and you vote. I mean, I want everybody to vote, and so should everybody on this dais. We should all want every person to vote. We should make it as easy as possible for everyone to vote.
Thank you.
So my 30 seconds with this. So I won't repeat what all my three friends here said, but I'll add two things to it. I think civics should be taught from the time you're in kindergarten until the time you graduate high school in 12th grade every year, and it gets more and more intellectually advanced. And the second thing I would do, more as a habit-forming thing, I would want the state legislature, and I would sign a bill into law that gives people some sort of small dollar tax credit on their state income tax for demonstrating that they registered to vote. Not because of the money, maybe it's only $10 or $20, because it gets in the habit. It's something they talk about every year in April, and hopefully they'll remember in November as part of the incentive to get people out for a practical purpose to go out and vote.
Thank you. One last question to Kathleen.
Thank you. So I have two quick questions. Gas tax, I know that Wisniewski, you voted against the gas tax. How does everybody else feel about the gas tax?
It was necessary. Our transportation trust fund was bankrupt. We should never have coupled it to tax cuts, but we needed to have the gas tax. And I'll be honest with you, we might need more. It's that bad. And I'm coming here trying to get elected. I'm telling you, we may have to raise taxes more. We are that far behind on infrastructure spending. So if you want to hear something that you want to hear, there's a lot of people for that. But I'm telling you that we may not have enough with the taxes that we raised.
Mr. Johnson?
I didn't like the gas tax the way it was passed or how it's structured, in part because it's regressive, but in part because you created essentially a slush fund with very little oversight. But here's the other problem: the gas tax is emblematic of Trenton's approach to sort of kicking the problems down the lane. because we know that fuel efficiency is going to increase. That means that if we're going to keep at the same level, we're going to have to actually increase the tax. There are other approaches that have been used across the country. Florida has a terrific example of how a public-private partnership was formed to cover a very expensive tunnel that was built. Not all of that can be adopted to New Jersey, but we have to have a better way. So 2-3 years down the line, we will either start to have this conversation again about increasing the gas tax, or we're going to develop a different path.
Well, let me just address that. I did vote no, but I voted no because the way the package was put together was horrible. First of all, the gas tax, the money raised, runs out in 7.5 years. And so another group of legislators is going to have to come back and ask for more money. I had actually put forward a proposal for a 25-cent gas tax increase that would literally fix the problem forever. We would be 40 years down the road before we'd have to actually start talking about how to fix the trust fund, and that would be because it would have too much money in it at that point in time. We gave away $1.2 billion a year, but the gas tax only raised $1.1 billion a year, so we lost $100 million a year net, and we have a death panel in the Transportation Trust Fund with 4 politicians deciding every project that gets done. Not transparency, not open government. So it was a mistake. We could have done better. As governor, I will fix that.
Thank you, Zinna.
So I would reduce the gas tax, reinstitute the millionaire's tax, so more of the folks from Goldman Sachs at the top 1% would pay more of their fair share rather than the regressive tax we have now. And second thing is, I would look at things like, look what just happened with ExxonMobil. A judge said, guess what, guys, you've got to pay an $8 billion fine for polluting our state. And what did our governor do when he got a $400,000 donation to the National Governors Association? He said, actually, you can keep your $8 billion. We're only going to fine you $200 million. That difference in that money would have funded the Transportation Trust Fund for 20 years. So I would not be thinking the way the current governor does. I would be thinking long-term, what's in the best interest of the state, and make sure that ExxonMobil pays its fair share and what it needs to pay to help us clean this state up.
Thank you.
So my other follow-up is $300 million State House renovation budget, maybe go up to 500 to 800 million. How do you feel about that?
I filed suit against it on the Friday after the EDA authorized the bonds, but what we found out is that very day, they did the resolution at 10:30 in the morning. At 10:35, they sold the bonds. We're in court. It was unconstitutional. The State House Joint Management Commission doesn't have the authority to lease out the State House, and I believe that we're going to be successful in court. Oral argument is on June 12th.
I hope John's successful in court. I view the state, that funding, that $300 million piece, which may go up more than $250 million, when we have all of these other fiscal problems in the state, as outrageous. But in particular, if you have visited Trenton and you see the level of disrepair of the schools and the public facilities there, the idea that the priority of any budget largesse would go to fix the State House when the gold dome is cast a shadow on so much need, to me is an outrage.
Mr. Zinna?
The shape of the State House is indicative of how the governors of this state have treated us for the past 20 or 30 years. They're allowing it to crumble. It literally has plywood nailed against many of the windows. It has deteriorated so badly. When Abraham Lincoln became president, his Secretary of the Treasury came to him and said, we should stop building the dome on the Capitol because we need the cash to buy cannons and bullets. And President Lincoln said no, because the continuous construction will be a sign that the Union will continue on for all eternity. But the governors we've had in the past didn't look at things that way. It was all three-card Monte, move the money from here, move the money from there. And what does the governor do now? He has a shell game where he goes around the Constitution to go ahead and spend the money without the people's okay. We can't do that. We have much better uses for this money that are more important. We need to figure out how we fix that Capitol building with cash, not with debt, over a long-term period of time that does not impact negatively any other programs.
Last word to Mr. Brennan.
I wanted to point out that Senator Lesniak is also involved in litigating over this, and he was first to the table. I want to give him credit for that. He's not here. But, you know, some of you folks are old enough to remember the show The Sopranos. And what's going on at the State House is what Tony would call a bust out. He has now lined up contracts with all kinds of people that have not been bidding. They're already working. So the idea that there's no bid contracts, he has now got no shows and no works and all that stuff that Tony Soprano was doling out with his Esplanade project, or when he had the Ramsey Outdoor shop that had to close. This is what it's about. And what are they doing? They're moving sensitive records out of the building. The Division of Records and Archives Management is not in control of our records. Now, I'm telling you that Chris Christie is the head of a crime family, and he is destroying evidence. And that's what this is, because he is not concerned about the State House when he leaves. This is not his call to make. He's on his way out the door, and he's leaving a mess. But you're going to find out that valuable records were lost and destroyed in this process. So it's far more sinister than him just lining his pockets on the way out the door. Bond counsel for this, Chiesa and Giantomasi, used to be Wolf Sampson. Now they're in charge of Atlantic City, and they're in charge of selling the bonds, and they're making millions upon millions of dollars. And we are living under a rampant criminality system of justice. And there's nobody talking about it in these terms. It's that simple. So under my administration, we would investigate each and every one of these contractors and track down all of the evidence that could be used in a subsequent prosecution of the governor of New Jersey for the crimes he committed. And we would rein in this process and take it incrementally and do the things that are a priority, not window dressing on the State House.
Thank you, thank you. All right, well, you know, we could probably go on for another hour or two.
I got time.
We want to thank you all
Closing
so
statements?
much. We have 5 minutes. If you can do it in like 30 seconds.
And tell us how we can ask you more questions outside of that.
But again, let me just finish thanking you all for coming and thanking you all for coming. This has been very informative, and we're so pleased that you all came.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for.
So how we can ask, thank you for that question. So I'm at markzinna2017.com, and our email is zinna@markzinna2017.com. Did I get that right, Harry? Yep. Okay, great, thank you. So in terms of my candidacy, I have experience on both the legislative and executive side of delivering public services, and I think you should take that into account when you go and vote in the primary on June 6th. But most importantly, you need to vote for the candidate that most represents what you want to do. And I've said this before, if you want a candidate that speaks truth to power and is not afraid of what he says, then Mr. Brennan is your candidate. If you want someone who has a deep policy understanding and fantastic analytical skills, then your candidate is Mr. Johnson. And Mr. Wisniewski here has multiple years of experience in the state legislature, understands how our government operates from the inside out, and if that's important to you, then this gentleman is your candidate. But again, if you want someone with legislative and executive experience who has managed and delivered public services using scarce public resource dollars, then I'm Mark Zinna and I'm your candidate. And thank you for having us here tonight.
Assemblyman?
Thank you very much, and thanks everybody for the opportunity to be with you and share ideas about the future of New Jersey. I'm a Main Street businessman. I run a law firm on Main Street in Cedarville. I'm not a Wall Street executive. I have 21 years of experience in the General Assembly. And that kind of experience is important because what we've seen over the past 2 decades in New Jersey are outsiders coming in and trying to convince the people of New Jersey that somehow governor is an entry-level position. That if you know nothing about New Jersey government, somehow you're best suited to come in and run it. We've seen that didn't work with John Corzine, and we see that hasn't worked with Chris Christie, and there's no reason to believe it will work going forward. What we need is a governor who has the understanding of how state government works, but also has been tested in the crucible to stand up to the special interests and the party leaders that want to run New Jersey for themselves and not for the people. And I have that record, both as a legislator and as somebody who has stood up, whether it was to our first Goldman Sachs governor, John Corzine, or whether it was to this governor, Chris Christie, time and time again, often by myself, stood up to the special interests. And so when we go forward to Election Day, just 7 short days from now, the fate of New Jersey is in your hands. We can go into a direction that is new by taking somebody who's experienced, who has the testing and has the credentials to stand up to special interests. I ask that you consider me. Thank you very much for the opportunity tonight.
Let's give Mr. Johnson the last word. Mr. Brennan?
Okay. I've been going to the wall as a citizen and a civic-minded person for the past 30 years. I've never once backed down from a fight, and I've had to fight a lot of massive fights. I bring all the resources at my command and my disposal in the interest of justice.
The library will be closing in 5 minutes. If you have any items, please bring them to the desk. If you're on a computer, please finish. Thank you.
So in bringing all the resources I have to bear to right the wrongs and fight the unjust system, I wonder where the people were that claim they have all this experience. Mr. Wisniewski, who wants to sell you on his experience, was the chairman of the state Democratic Party. He never once raised a bylaw change to ask to change the problem of money in politics when he was collecting the money. Mr. Johnson is a partner at Debevoise and Plimpton, which is to the legal services what Goldman Sachs is to financial services, representing pipelines and petroleum vendors and fracking companies. So if you want somebody who knows how it's not working and is ready to fix it, then I'm your candidate, because I know it's broken and I know that nobody's got leverage on me. And if you could just look at the ELEC reports and see, I've got $10,000 to run for governor and I'm doing pretty well with that. I don't owe anybody anything. Nobody owes me anything. I haven't been in politics for the past 30 years. On the inside, thank you very much.
Mr. Johnson?
I am really grateful to all of you for being here, not just tonight, but for the work that you have been doing since the Trump election and before. If you want to check questions on my policy or ask me additional questions, go to jimjohnsonforgovernor.com. You can reach me directly at jim@jimjohnson4governor.com. One of the things that you will find is that for 3 decades, whether or not I was in public service as a federal employee or as a private citizen where I was often contributing much of my time, is that I am committed to serve. I'm the 4th generation of my family to have been raised in the state. I'm raising the 5th. We are committed to service to the state. I was the only candidate to introduce ethics reform because our state government is broken and we need to bring people back in and we need to establish trust for government. If you elect me governor, I would choose people to serve this state who understands that that is their job and that they would get up first thing in the morning and ask, what can I do of service to the people of the state? And when they went to bed at night, they would ask themselves, what have I done to serve the people of this state? We have huge problems in this state to address, but we also have tremendous potential. And it basically has been the case that our government has been on our backs, not helping us reach that potential and keeping it from moving forward. I want to get the state moving forward together, and I understand that to do that, all of us need to be in it, and I ask you to join me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.